My friends call me John. But a son of a bitch screw like you better address me as Mr. Dillinger.
I like baseball, movies, good clothes, fast cars, whiskey, and you.
Alright, well, since we already covered Heat on this channel, I figured it was another good time to cover yet another fantastic film, also directed by Michael Mann, which was released back in the summer of 2009. And that film is none other than Public Enemies, starring Johnny Depp and Christian Bale. The film follows the American outlaw and gangster John Dillinger, played by Johnny Depp, who with his gang would go on to rob multiple banks during the Great Depression in the US from June 1933 until his last in July 1934, all while being pursued by notorious FBI agent Melvin Purvis, who's played by Christian Bale. If you're a fan of old school weaponry like the Tommy gun, want to know who it was that made all the customized weapons Dillinger's gang uses, or just have a general curiosity of what parts of the film were true to life and which ones weren't, well, stay tuned because we'll be covering all of that. So let's get right into the weapons used in Public Enemies. So I'm sure it'll be no surprise to you to hear that, of course, the first gun we're going to have to cover is that of the M1921 Thompson Submachine Gun, which can be seen used in the hands of, well, basically just about every single person in this film. So the M1921 Thompson was originally designed by Brigadier General John T. Thompson in the Auto Ordnance Corporation. It was conceived late in the World War I as a lightweight trench broom to clear trenches and street corners. Unfortunately, its creation at this point was a little too late, and it didn't get to see any frontline use in the war. Believe it or not, early prototypes like the 1919 were literally marketed as the Annihilator. The first mass-produced Thompsons were commercially launched in 1921, and Colt under contract manufactured about 15,000 guns. Unfortunately for them, it wasn't a cash cow right out the gate, and sales of the weapon were slow. One, because the war was over, so the military wasn't in much need for them, and two, well, this weapon was not cheap to buy. The gun was heavily marketed towards law enforcement, banks and armored crew cars, and prison guards. Even the US Post Office bought M1921s for Marine mail guard details, and some Marines would go on to use the Thompson in China and Nicaragua during the Banana Wars. Early ownership of the Thompson tended to concentrate with wealthier and institutional buyers, but there was one group of people who found it quite useful for their business endeavors. And those people were usually gangsters. Because gangsters used the weapon in sensational Prohibition-era shootouts, often with the distinctive 50-round drum, the press and later dozens of Hollywood films would cement the Thompson, especially the 1921 pattern, as the iconic gangster weapon of the 1920s and 30s. The cost of the gun at its launch in 1921 was $200, which is roughly around $3,600 in today's money, which again made it a very expensive buy, especially through the Depression years. This is also one of the main reasons why police departments back then only bought a few. The gun operates on a delayed blowback using the Blish lock, which is an H-shaped bronze wedge between dissimilar metals. John Thompson believed during the time it delayed opening at high pressure. However, this proved to really not matter as later wartime models dropped it without issues. Chambered for 45 ACP, the gun is select fire with separate semi and full auto settings on the selector, and it also features a top-mounted charging handle and a barrel length of 10.5 inches. The gun can feed from either a 20-round stick magazine or the iconic 50-round drum magazine. Even a 100-round drum magazine existed, but this one was very uncommon and not very practical in battle. The original M1921 didn't feature a cuts compensator like you can see on the ones in the film, and this version was cataloged as the M1921A. The version that featured a cuts compensator wasn't available until 1926, and these versions would be known as the M1921 AC, which is the version that appears to be used by everyone in the film. Both models are also iconic for their cooling fins on the barrel. Around 1928, the Navy and US Marine Corps was looking to adopt it into their arsenal, but they asked for it to be updated with a slower rate of fire so the gun wouldn't burn through a magazine within 1 second of squeezing the trigger. To meet the Navy and Marines' desires for a calmer gun, Auto Ordnance refitted many unsold 1921s with a heavier actuator and buffer to slow the cyclic rate. These versions were known as the M1928, and since many were just refitted, unsold 1921s, a lot of the time, to mark them, they literally just overstamped the 1 to an 8 on the receiver, creating the model 1928 marking. The 1921 had a rate of fire of around 900 rounds per minute, but for the 1928 versions, the heavier actuator slowed it down to around 650 to 725 rounds per minute. For the film, the director Michael Mann made sure the cast got a lot of experience with the guns they would be handling on screen. Johnny Depp apparently took quite a liking to the Thompson specifically. learning as much as he could about handling and firing the weapon, as well as learning how to field strip it, which he does in the film in a brief scene. Under Armorer Harry Liu, Depp went out to the range and spent days live firing real Thompson submachine guns, testing both drum and stick mags to get comfortable with it before they went in front of the camera. Production also brought in weapons advisor Taryn Butler to help tighten all the actors' handling, reloads, and on-camera discipline. The Thompson can be seen most notably used by, of course, John Dillinger, as well as by several of his gang members, including Babyface Nelson, John Red Hamilton, and even Charles Pretty Boy Floyd at the beginning. During the breakout from Crown Point Jail, Herbert Youngblood can be seen using a Thompson during the escape. Melvin Purvis and many of his agents can be seen using the Thompson as well, notably during the raid at the hotel when they find Babyface Nelson, and of course later on in the woods during the Little Bohemia shootout. Another really awesome gun that can be seen used by a decent amount of characters in this film is that of the M1918 Browning automatic rifle. The Browning automatic rifle, also known as the BAR, also known as the M1918, was John Browning's shoulder-fired automatic rifle introduced to U.S. forces in 1918 to give infantry squads portable automatic fire. One of the main reasons for its creation was because in World War I, the U.S. entered combat with very few effective automatic weapons for assaulting entrenched positions. Browning designed a relatively light automatic rifle to give small units organic suppressive fire without needing heavy, crew-served guns. Unlike the Thompson, the BAR would make it into the last part of World War I, as BARs were shipped to AEF units in mid-1918 and were used in the Meuse-Argonne offensive. Though introduced late, they made a noticeable tactical imprint. The BAR was designed to be carried and fired by one man, intended for walking fire during advances and for suppressing enemy positions while riflemen maneuvered. The gun works using a gas-operated, rising tilting bolt lock design and fires from an open bolt. This was meant to reduce cook-offs and aided cooling. Chambering 30-06 cartridges, it feeds from detachable 20-round box magazines, although some 40-round mags did exist later on, but these were mostly aftermarket or experimental, and not standard issue. Early M1918 models had a semi and full auto selector, but later A2 models removed the semi and provided two different full auto rates, a slow option for controlled automatic fire, and a faster option when needed. Although Browning had designed the weapon to be a so-called light automatic weapon, yeah, I don't think many who actually carried the BAR would agree with that. The gun was not light to carry for a single soldier. The original M1918 model weighed about 16 pounds unloaded, and the updated A2 model for World War II was even heavier, weighing close to 20 pounds unloaded. Not to mention, only having 20 rounds to work with, limited sustained fire compared to belt-fed MGs at the time. Original M1918 models had a rate of fire of around 500 to 650 rounds per minute, but the A2 model, which included two different automatic modes, fired at around 300 to 450 rounds per minute in its slow rate, and again 500 to 650 rounds per minute in the fast. This weapon appears to be the main choice for the character Homer Van Meter, as he can be seen using it multiple times throughout the film, notably during the first bank robbery in the movie, or later during the Little Bohemia shootout. And one of the FBI agents also during the Bohemia shootout can be seen armed with one as well. In the beginning of the film, when Agent Purvis and his men are chasing after Pretty Boy Floyd, who, if you didn't notice, is actually played by Channing Tatum, Purvis can be seen armed with and taking Floyd down with his Mauser 98 Sporter. The Mauser 98 Sporter is essentially the legendary Mauser 1898 military bolt action, reimagined as a hunting rifle. Gunsmiths would take the controlled feed M98 action and turn it into a compact, accurate field gun by shortening or reprofiling the barrel, reshaping and shortening the stock, and rebarreling or rechambering for common sporting rounds like the 30-06, 270, or 308. They would also drill and tap the receiver for scope mounts and bed the action for better accuracy. Typical sporter barrels run around 20 to 24 inches in many conversions, and the work ranges from light cosmetic jobs to full restorations that change chambering and throat dimensions, which is why headspace and correct gunsmithing are absolutely critical if you ever fire a converted Mauser. Hunters and builders love the M98 Sporter because the action is ridiculously strong, the controlled feed extractor is reliable in brush and adverse conditions, and surplus military Mausers were plentiful and cheap enough in the 20th century. Conversely, crude or careless sporterizing, like improper headspace, a mismatched barrel, or sloppy bedding, absolutely destroys value and can be very dangerous. One thing that's hard to miss on the rifle that Purvis uses is the two triggers. Now, the gun isn't using two firing triggers for two barrels, but instead it's a double set trigger arrangement, which is very common on vintage hunting and target rifles. Basically, in that setup, one trigger is the setter, the lighter trigger in the back, and the other is the firing trigger, the heavier one in the front. You set the back trigger first, which mechanically preloads the sear, so the firing trigger takes a much lighter pull. This is ideal for precise, single-shot aiming. Agent Purvis again can be seen using this weapon in the beginning when they take down Pretty Boy Floyd, which, a little trivia for you, actually happens out of historical order in the film, as John Dillinger was actually shot and killed before they would gun down Floyd. One of the most common handguns seen used in this film would definitely be that of the 1911 Colt government models, which can be seen used in the hands of just about the entire Dillinger gang, as well as most of the FBI agents. Dillinger notably keeps two holstered up in a leather cross-draw shoulder holster, but he rarely can be seen using them in the film. During the end of the film at the Biograph Theater, Agent Winstead can be notably seen using one to finally take down John Dillinger, and during the Little Bohemia shootout after the car chase, Purvis can be seen using one to take down Nelson. The Colt government model is a commercial counterpart to John M. Browning's M1911, which was of course adopted by the US military. Like its military counterpart, the government model is a full-size, single-action, lock-breech recoil-operated pistol that set the template for modern service handguns. Introduced by Colt in 1912 for the civilian and police market, it keeps the iconic 5-inch barrel, steel frame and slide, tilting barrel, and single-stack magazine which standardly feeds 7 rounds and 45 ACP. The real-life Dillinger was said to favor the government model that was chambered specifically in .38 Super for its ability to pierce through cars and body armor. Not only did his gang have a lot of these handguns in their arsenal, but thanks to their good friend Hyman Lebman, they were able to arm themselves with a few baby machine guns as well. Yes, you heard that correctly. Lebman successfully turned these Colts into full auto handguns by reworking the 1911 fire control into a fully automatic only operation, adding on a Thompson style vertical foregrip to the front and compensators to the barrel to tame the vicious recoil it had. And since the gun was known to have an extremely high cyclic rate, often estimated to be around 1,000 rounds per minute, they of course almost always needed to be fitted with extended magazines, so you wouldn't run dry in less than 1/10 of a second. Just for a little historical context, Hyman Lebman, also known as Hyman Lehman, was a San Antonio, Texas gunsmith and leatherworker who operated out of his gun shop at 111 South Florida Street. During the Great Depression, he became infamous for crafting specialized, custom-made firearms for some of the era's most notorious bank robbers and outlaws, earning a lasting reputation as the underworld's go-to gunsmith. These compact baby machine pistols were very flashy, but also very hard to control. Even though full auto handguns had already existed in small numbers in Europe at the time, Hyman Lebman was, in a way, a pioneer of full auto pistols in the United States, even if he was making them for criminals at the time. Apparently, the reason Lebman put a compensator on the barrel was that one night when he was testing the gun in his basement firing range that was located under his shop, the recoil on one burst was so high that one of the rounds went directly up overhead and through the floor of the shop while his young son was up there visiting at the time. And the incident scared him so much that he added a compensator to the barrel to reduce the recoil. It appears that Lebman made a decent amount of these pistol conversions, as a full-auto Lebman Colt belonging to Dillinger was found at one of his hideouts in St. Paul, Minnesota on March 31, 1934, as well as one was left behind at the Little Bohemia Lodge 3 weeks later. And when Chicago bootlegger Roger the Terrible was arrested in Wisconsin on July 19, 1933, one of Lebman's baby machine guns was found in his car. Unfortunately, Lebman's work would eventually lead the FBI to tracing several full-auto 1911s and modified Winchesters back to his San Antonio gun shop. The serial numbers and sales trail led directly to him, and federal agents would question him multiple times about his activities. But Lebman would always maintain the notion that he knew nothing of his customers' gangster connections, and he thought they were just charming, wealthy oil men who were just interested in unusual guns. The FBI couldn't really get him on anything at the time though, because this was right before the National Firearms Act, so there was no federal restrictions on making or selling full-auto weapons at the time. In 1935, Lebman was indicted for violating the National Firearms Act, specifically for possessing and transferring unregistered machine guns. However, the case ended up being dismissed, and the FBI couldn't prove that he knowingly sold them to criminals, or that he had made the guns after the NFA took effect. So, basically he walked off scot-free in the end, mainly since the laws were literally brand new, and the paper trail which led to him really didn't establish any intent. After that, Lebman kept a much lower profile, but stayed in the gun and saddle business in Texas for decades before retiring in the 70s. I'm also pretty positive there's even a little nod to him in the film. Although it's not explicitly stated and there's never a name given for this guy's character, there's a scene early in the film, right after the first prison break, where John and his gang stop off at a farmhouse, and during the scene he can be seen field stripping his Thompson while talking about the issues he experienced while firing it. He then gives it over to this older man to fix, who says he'll cut off a coil on the mainspring and widen the port. And again, he's never given a name or explained in the film, so I'm pretty positive Mann added this as a fun little Easter egg to represent Lebman. Now this isn't confirmed by production, this is just my own speculation, but I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Now, real quickly, since the film is a dramatized account of the real-life John Dillinger and his gang, I thought it would be interesting to quickly go through some of the parts of the film that were actually true to life, as well as touch on the ones that were dramatized for the film. For instance, the film correctly shows John Dillinger as a bank robber during the Great Depression, leading a gang and being pursued by the FBI, who at the time just went by the Bureau of Investigation under Melvin Purvis. Or, another true-to-life detail portrayed in the film was Dillinger's escape from Lake County Jail in Crown Point, Indiana, with a fake wooden pistol. This was a real event which occurred on March 3, 1934, when Dillinger escaped while under custody of the Indiana State Police. I for sure thought the romance part between him and Billy Frechette was added for drama, but no. The relationship between Dillinger and Frechette was based in reality. Frechette was indeed associated with Dillinger and was later incarcerated. The film also shows the formation of investigative techniques like fingerprinting or telephone tapping, and the FBI's other evolving methods during that era. While the exact dialogue and scenes are dramatized, the broad idea of law enforcement evolving heavily around this time period is very accurate. All in all, the film was praised by the author of the book the screenplay was based on as being fairly historically accurate in major moments. Again, like the jailbreak from Crown Point, or the Little Bohemia Lodge gunfight, and even Dillinger's death outside the Biograph Theater in Chicago were all shot on location and aligned with historical record in broad strokes. Some of the parts that are done up a little or even fictionalized was the prison break at the start of the film, where Dillinger himself infiltrates the Indiana State Penitentiary, leads a dramatic firefight, and his mentor Walter Dietrich gets killed. In reality, Dillinger did arrange weapon smuggling into prison breaks for places like Pierpoint or Mackley, but he was not present at the breakout of the Indiana State Prison, and only a few shots were fired in the real event. The real Walter Dietrich also wasn't killed in this escape. Some other fictionalized parts were the deaths of some of Dillinger's associates. In the film, associates like Homer Van Meter and Babyface Nelson are killed during the ambush at Little Bohemia, where, in reality, Van Meter died weeks after Dillinger's death, and Nelson was killed later in 1934 in a separate gun battle, specifically November 27, 1934. One of the more interesting shotguns used in this film would definitely have to be that of FBI agent Winstead's Winchester Model 1901, which he can be seen armed with during the Little Bohemia shootout. The Winchester Model 1901 was the last lever-action shotgun ever made by Winchester and a direct descendant of John M. Browning's earlier Model 1887. Built from 1901 to around 1920, it was essentially a strengthened, modernized version of that design, created to handle the higher pressures of the new smokeless powder era. Chambered only in 10 gauge, the 1901 used a reinforced steel receiver, a heavier bolt and barrel, and an improved locking system to survive the powerful loads of the time. It operated on the same lever-action principle as the 1887, feeding from a tubular magazine under the barrel that held 5 shells plus 1 in the chamber, ejecting spent ones upward when the lever was worked. Standard barrel lengths ranged from 28 to 32 inches, with blued barrels, case-hardened receivers, and walnut stocks. Though mechanically strong and beautifully built, it was relatively heavy, weighing about 9 to 10 pounds, and by the early 1900s it was already outdated by faster pump-action designs like the Model 1897 and later the Model 12. Only about 13,500 were produced before Winchester discontinued it, again making the 1901 the company's final lever-action shotgun, a formidable yet transitional firearm that bridged the black powder age and the smokeless era, and today stands as a prized collector's piece. Again, Agent Winstead can be seen mainly using this weapon, most notably during the part where he and another agent chase Red and Dillinger out into the woods during the Little Bohemia shootout. Another really interesting shotgun that can be seen used by the character Red in this film is the Remington Model 11. He can notably be seen using this in the beginning of the movie when they break the gang out of prison, and later during the shootout at Little Bohemia when he and Johnny are escaping into the woods. Some of the agents in the film appear to use a few as well. Red's Model 11 appears to have the barrel and stock sawed off, which was actually another part of the film that was true to life, for a sawed-off model was actually found in the hands of the real-life Dillinger gang. The Remington Model 11 was the first American-made semi-automatic shotgun, introduced in 1905 and produced until the late 1940s. Browning's Auto 5 was technically the world's first, but that one was manufactured by FN in Belgium. The Model 11 was based directly on Browning's Auto 5 design under license, and it used Browning's long recoil operating system, where the barrel and bolt travel backwards together after firing, ejecting the spent shell and chambering a new one as they returned forward. The gun's instantly recognizable humpback receiver housed a tubular magazine beneath the barrel that typically held 4 to 5 shells plus 1 in the chamber, and it also featured an adjustable friction ring system that allowed shooters to tune the recoil for light or heavy loads. It was manufactured in 12, 16, and 20 gauge, and during its run around 850,000 units were produced, making it quite the popular shotgun for its time. It was known to be heavy but extremely reliable, and it was offered in sporting, riot, and police configurations. The gun even served limited military roles during World War II. Its blued steel finish, walnut stock, and signature receiver profile gave it both ruggedness and elegance, while its long recoil mechanism made it one of the most mechanically distinctive shotguns of its era. Though eventually replaced by the lighter, streamlined Model 1148, the original Model 11 remains historically significant as the shotgun that introduced American shooters to practical semi-automatic fire, bridging the gap between classic pumps like the Winchester 1897 and the autoloaders that would go on to dominate the 20th century. So, if you're familiar at all with the director Michael Mann, then I'm sure you won't be surprised in the slightest to hear how much effort and meticulous detail he and his entire team put into the production of this film, ensuring its authenticity to the time period. They of course filmed at the real places these historical events occurred, including spots like the Little Bohemia Lodge in Wisconsin, or the old Lake County Crown Point Jail in Indiana, or even the Biograph Theater in Chicago. They would then have production designer Nathan Crowley restore or disguise them to their 1930s condition, restoring Midwestern towns and other areas so the geography and architecture you're seeing are largely the real thing or faithful doubles dressed to match. Crowley's team literally re-welded cell bar mechanisms in the derelict Crown Point Jail so they functioned on camera, and even fabricated a removable, rubberized cobblestone street so foregrounds would read period correct in Mann's sharp digital photography. At Little Bohemia, they temporarily removed the lodge's preserved bolt hole windows and doors, replaced them with production glass to shoot out, and dressed the grounds with trees and dirt over the tarmac to erase modern intrusions. The characters' wardrobes were also built from research, with costume designer Colleen Atwood using the looks from contemporary photos of Dillinger and his gang to correctly get the right look of these gangsters in the 30s. Mann even brought in a real stick-up man to advise on the actor's robbery techniques. Specifically, he brought in Joseph Jerry Scalise, a Chicago outfit jewel thief who was notorious for the Marlboro diamond heist, on as a technical advisor to vet details of how pros actually move in a bank, showing them things like spacing, crowd control, grab-and-go mechanics, and different getaway habits to make the movements of the actors as authentic as possible. The production also sourced an enormous fleet of genuine pre-war automobiles. Specifically, over 35 fully functional 1930s cars were gathered from private collectors across Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana to be used in the film. Many of these vehicles were dirt-dusted, dulled, or mechanically tuned to appear lived in, another great addition to the authenticity. All in all, the dedication of the production team to recreate a true-to-life 1930s time period really stood out in the final product and greatly added to the film's overall experience, once again showcasing Mann's incredible abilities as a director. Red's character also carries a really cool sidearm in the film as well, which looks to be a Colt Model 1902, which he can notably be seen using during the Sioux Falls bank robbery. Designed by John M. Browning and introduced in 1902 by Colt, the Model 1902 semi-automatic pistol marked a key evolution of American automatic handguns. Available in two main variants, the military model with an 8-round magazine and longer grip, and the sporting model with 7 rounds and a more compact grip. It came chambered in .38 ACP, and featured a short recoil, swinging link lock breech mechanism. Unlike its predecessor, the Model 1900, it removed the awkward rear sight safety lever and improved ergonomics and internal safety. Though never widely adopted by the US military, its production run and commercial sales helped lay the foundation for the iconic Colt 1911. Today, the Colt Model 1902 stands as a landmark early semi-automatic pistol, valued by collectors for its historical role in craftsmanship. When Homer isn't using his bar, he does appear to also favor a customized Winchester Model 1907 that appears to be fitted with a Thompson foregrip and a cuts compensator. This is another customized weapon that was made by Hyman Lebman. The Winchester Model 1907 is a blowback-operated, semi-automatic rifle chambered for the proprietary .351 Winchester self-loading cartridge. It was introduced in 1907 and was manufactured up until 1957. During that period, about 58,700 were made, and the gun was marketed at police, security, and sporting buyers, as well as saw limited military use specifically by France, the UK, and Russia in World War I and after. Not only did the gun attract attention from law enforcement, but criminals also really seemed to take a liking to it as well in the 1920s and 30s. The Model 1907 was developed at Winchester as an evolution of earlier Winchester self-loading rifles like the 1903 and the 1905. The .351 WSL was a relatively powerful medium-bore cartridge for the era, and the gun's detachable magazines allowed for fast reloads. It was well known for its robust construction and decent short-range stopping power, which was useful for policing and hunting. The .351 WSL also performed well from the 20-inch barrel Winchester used. However, one of its drawbacks users noted was that its blowback action required a relatively heavy bolt and limited the cartridge choice. So again, the 1907 was another one of the guns which was customized by gunsmith Hyman Lebman. He would shorten the Winchester's barrel, fit it with a compensator, machined a replacement metal forend, and bolted on a Thompson style vertical foregrip. Unfortunately, this gun gets far too little screen time in the film than it truly deserves, but Homer can be seen armed with it during the Sioux Falls bank robbery, and later during the shootout at Little Bohemia, Ed Schaus can be seen using one as well. Yes, this is the same Ed Schaus that John pistol whipped and threw out of the car in the beginning, so how we ended up back here with the gang so soon later, I have no idea. If you guys enjoyed this kind of content and want to help support the channel, maybe go check out our Patreon. It's just $1 a month. We post the exact same videos over there as we do here on YouTube, same narration, but the ones over there include much more and much longer movie clips, especially ones that show things like a lot of automatic fire or lots of gore, just because we can't always get away with that stuff here on YouTube. So a lot of times I'll end up having to cut things to make the video so-called safe for YouTube. But yeah, they also include more things overall, like behind the scenes and deleted scenes. So yeah, link to the Patreons in the video's description if you want to check that out. But yeah, that's going to do it for this one. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like the video and subscribe to the channel for more, and hopefully we'll see you in the next one.